Hello, everyone. Since the last bull market, I've heard this hypothesis of Ripple XRP, backed by gold, Stellar XLM, being backed by silver, Zenfin's XDC, backed by copper. And can we throw Quant into the mix? Well, you're going to want to stick around to hear that answer, but guess what? I think it is all true. Yes, I think it is simply all true, but I'll back it up with some real research. I want to state this. There's going to be many of you guys that are going to listen to what people say on the internet, and you're going to get flooded out of the real generational wealth. Consider sticking to the end of this outline. Hear what I have to share with you in regards to the material. I think it's all worth pointing out and all worth paying attention to. Shout out to our brother Ahmed. He pointed out in regards to Stellar and Silver. Is there anything there recently? Well, the answer is yes. Smash that like. Consider sticking to the end of the outline. Choose to do so. There's chapters. You can watch 2x speed. Let's jump into it. Why does this all matter? And is this a true thing? And could we very well see some huge gains for that generational wealth for the future? I think the answer is yes. Let's jump into it. So first thing I'm going to pull up is this right here from X. And this is what I was referred to. Some of you guys have seen this, and I get that, but I want to point out some key things here. So for one, you see this from Coinbase, and it mentions some things. Number one, it mentions that they're excited to announce the Coinbase derivatives, expanding their suite of CFTC regulated futures. Get ready for the silver and stellar contracts launching on November 11, 2024. Now keep in mind that last bull market, BTC all-time highs happened to be on November 11th. That's when BTC was at 69K. And of course, we've basically smashed that to 73K, right? So people feel as though that's going to go higher. Keep in mind, when we talk about derivatives, that's the biggest potential out there when it comes to tokenized assets and so on. So it says read more. We're going to do that. Straight from Coinbase, they announced the launch of Silver SLR and Stellar XLM futures from Coinbase derivatives. More importantly, you see, for example, some other ones listed: BTC, ETH, BCH, Litecoin, Doge, Shiba Inu, AVAX, DOT, Chainlink. But you see gold, and you even see oil. And again, that was posted on Halloween. Now, what's interesting is when I looked more into this, I said to myself, is there any other examples about precious metals and so on? Now, some of you guys probably have countless examples, but for the purposes of this outline, I thought I'd jump into this. This is from Kinesis.money, okay? And what we see here is in regards to like going into a whole new monetary system. It talks about, for example, Kinesis was established in 2018, and basically speaking, they have a solution, an entirely new monetary system. Well, think about where we're entering now. We are entering into a new monetary system as referenced from the IMF and the World Bank and countless other sources. But at Kinesis, they point out the whole thing of fully allocated precious metals, gold, silver, etc., etc. And again, this whole notion of gold on the blockchain, borderless currency, all these things sound really bullish, do they not? But as I got further into this, they have an ecosystem. And in their ecosystem, they mention a few key things. As we know, MasterCard has a thing with Stellar partnership. They even have it with, for example, Quant, and they even have it with Hedera HBAR. But it's understanding the ones that need to highlight today. And then, of course, you see Stellar. All right, so been there, done that. What about some other ones? Well, even below that, you see Zenfin, XDC. Thought I'd point that out because industry leaders in fully allocated precious metals, well, you can see how this all comes together, which brings me to the next thing. How many times have you seen this cited from some of your favorite channels? I've even shared it here on the live show before. And what do you see? You see, for example, the International Monetary Fund. You see the BIS. You see the World Economic Forum, who want you to eat lots of bugs, right? Yeah, I know. But you also see World Bank and SWIFT. And you see all these ones with these claims about Ripple XRP, backed by gold, Stellar XLM, Silver, Zenfin, like I said, even Algo, right? Palladium and IOTA. But again, are these statements true? I really think the answer is yes. So, as you guys know, last week I came out with that Quant Basel III video. Basel basically selecting Quant. You won't see official announcement about that, but I did show 100% proof, in my opinion, with backed up research. So, highlight is Basel III, International Regulatory Accord, that introduced, and I'll zoom in more, a set of reforms designed to mitigate risk within the international banking sector by requiring banks to maintain certain leverage ratios and keep certain levels of reserve capital on hand. Is this a true thing? I think the answer is yes, and I'll get more into this, especially when it comes to Tier 1 asset clarity and market liquidity management. So take you over to here. I want you to see a little emphasis in regards to AmericanBanker.com. Why? Well, you saw here that back in 2023, the end of 2023, which is almost a year from now, that Basel III has an endgame and 5 things to watch in 2024. Let's face it, we're not done with 2024, but it says, are you ready for the new all-in-one chip card? We are set to go. Well, that's a topic for another day, and I'll do something in regards to that, in regards to Jasmine. But what's interesting here is what is mentioned in regards to derivatives. So we see the outlook about reforms. We see the whole thing in regards to the industry participants, but it says here, plain as day from American Banker, the higher capital requirements will, in my opinion, not could, but will benefit the bottom lines of U.S. banks by improving their credit ratings, thus decreasing the borrowing costs and bettering their positions on, of course, derivatives. And now, what do you also see? Constant references to gold-plated and all this talk about gold. Lots of talk about gold, right? So, what kind of risk do they face? And more importantly, would we see examples of, banks coming together to create mechanisms for this new, I guess you could say, money that's backed by something, right? Because we know that we've gone off of the gold standard for quite a bit since, 1971, 73, give or take, in that area, early 70s. So is there a willingness to move on from here? Well, I think the answer is yes. And what you see here is, again, from CNBC, introduced July 2023. It's the regulatory overhaul known as the Basel Endgame. And it would basically have boosted capital requirements for the world's largest banks by roughly 19%. Now, on our end, 19% doesn't sound like much, but on their end, it's a huge, huge deal. More importantly, as we get further into it, introduced back in July 2023, you see some examples that there was a proposed Basel Endgame, and basically speaking, it involved a capital surcharge of rules for the biggest global institutions. So did that really start? Yes, it did. And if anything, we have seen some outlines in regards to deadlines about what the banks have to have held on, I guess you could say, their crypto asset balance sheets coming up soon in 2025. So I take you to this next part. I want you guys to realize that the journey, like they mentioned, to improve capital requirements since the global financial crisis, it's been a long one, but Basel III Endgame is an important element of the effort. The broad and material changes to both proposals have been outlined, at least then, that would better balance the benefits and cost of capital. Okay? So, as I get further into this, understand the citations. Straight from Quant Network. Why are banks so cautious in regards to all of this? Well, you see here that they, as in Quant Network, mention the whole topic of mission critical infrastructure and how it needs to be on closed private networks that are typically interbank. Now, when we understand that, we get into the topic of hybrid approaches. And again, bridging the gap between liquidity provided by public blockchains and the appeal of digital assets should be whose objective? Quant's objective. All right. Well, that, would that lead to derivatives? Yes. And we'll get into that in a bit. But again, I want you guys to understand that back in December of 2017, Basel III finalized post-crisis reforms. And you got to keep in mind, this was long before the pandemic even broke out. Did they know something that we didn't know? Well, I'm not trying to make conspiracy here, everybody, but sometimes people feel as though, yes, the answer is yes. So we understand that that was cited from the abyss. And when we get more into it, it's like some people ask, well, Max, you mentioned gold, you mentioned silver, you mentioned all these other excuse me. But how would Basel III affect gold? Well, basically it's like this, and shout out to Quant Papa for this particular screenshot. Basel III regulations make gold a more attractive asset for banks by allowing bullion held in vaults or on an allocated basis to be treated as cash with a 0% risk weight. This lowers the capital requirements for banks holding gold, potentially increasing the institutional demand for precious metals. Oh, Max, you're just quoting something from 2017. No, I'm not. Look what it says. That's actually from last summer of this year, 2024. Now, as we get more into it, I want you guys to see just a little brief thing here, because this guy in the past in 2019 cited some things. And it's Basel III and gold, the big picture. Is there really a big picture? I fast forward to these key areas. I used to teach history. Listen to this. If anything, if you don't know about this, you're going to want to know. Listen to what he has to say here. And if anything, give him a follow. I always try to, recommend some of these people. Gold Silver with Mike Maloney. Listen to this. We'll come right back. Here we go.
We didn't have a reserve bank that was doing international settlements or acting as a hub of any type of monetary system until the Bank of England. So when they show Portugal for 80 years and Spain for 110 years, and then Holland being the world reserve currency and France for 95 years, these are just the predominant currencies on the planet. And the reason they're predominant is because their economy was the predominant economy. They had an economic boom. They were sailing all over the planet, and they were doing a lot of trade with other countries. And when you import goods from other countries, your currency flows from your country to that other country. So you have other countries all over the world flooded with the currencies from these different countries at these different periods in time. And then the Bank of England established we went on to the classical gold standard in the late 1800s, and the Bank of England was the clearinghouse for that, with a big pallets of gold down in the basement, and if one country owed another country gold, they could transfer a bar and make an entry, or just make entries on the allocation on the books. Now, when that ended, Great Britain sort of faded. It didn't happen suddenly, so I've modified this a little. There's a little overlap there between Great Britain and the U.S. Great Britain went off of the gold standard. All the countries, all the combatants in Europe went off of the gold standard when World War I broke out and started printing tons of currency. But then there was the banking conference in Genoa, Italy in 1922, and they came up with a new world monetary system, and in that world monetary system, Great Britain and the United States would become the hubs of the international gold standard, and that was called the Gold Exchange Standard, and it worked until Great Britain pulled out of it in 1931. So there's a 19-year overlap between these two gold standards, but the point of all of this is that reserve currency status doesn't last forever. And with the next crisis, there's chinks in the armor, there's nails in the coffin of the global dollar standard, which we're on right now. But the point of it is that predominant currency status, the average has been about 94 years, and we're 98, 99 years now plus into this system of the global U.S. dollar standard, and it's a fiat currency standard. But what was lacking from this chart that the people at Incrementum first introduced was the fact that gold has been the predominant currency for most of this period of time, and it's real money. And then I added, it's been the predominant central bank reserve currency for almost 300 years.
Okay, so it's been the predominant currency, and if anything, you saw, some of that citation in regards to the reference to the central banks. You get the gist. So again, understand, he was talking about, like World War I, right? Fast forward to where we're at now. I mean, say what you want, in 2024, that would be roughly 105 years later, and we see this shift, if you will. So, things kind of add up, especially when you reference history. So, take you to this next part. I want you guys to understand some other key things that definitely need to be mentioned and definitely need to be shared with you. Quant Network has in the past cited some key things. And what do you see from March 14, 2023 from Andrew Carrier? It's the whole thing about carbon credit platforms. And I understand that, a lot of you guys aren't really big fans of that. And I'm not saying I am either, but it's recognizing what can happen in regards to these particular markets. More importantly, is understanding what you see here in regards to the key terminology, because Quant recognizes the potential for tokenization. For one, tokenized carbon, in simple terms, is the digital representation of real-world carbon credits. On the blockchain, each carbon credit is transferred onto the blockchain using carbon bridges. So when we talk about, bridge currencies, understand what it also bridges to in other particular markets. So you see, carbon bridges are connected to traditional registries like Vera and Gold Standard. Now think about that for a moment. Gold Standard? Quant mentioned in some of this? Well, look what it says. Some believe that labeling is critical and that carbon credits should be thought of less like gold and more like diamonds. Now, this is where I was stating the whole thing like quant with diamonds. We use all these analogies, do we not, when it comes to some of this? Ripple, XRP Gold, Stellar, XLM Silver, Zenfin XDC, Copper, Quant, Gold, Diamonds. Sounds nuts, but it's worth pointing out. And if anything, taking it to what matters, because when we get more into the whole topic of this, well, it's the whole thought about, for example, carbon credits and how they originate from the same project in vintage, year of issue, and how they are regarded as fungible tokens. As we know, Quant has their own standard for smart, secure, smart contracts in regards to QRC 721 and this game changer. As I take more further into this, I want you to understand more concepts of the concept of gold, Quant, XRP, all this stuff, right? Stable coins. Well, like it says in brief, a digital currency that is paid to a stable asset such as the dollar or gold. In brief, how do we take a digital asset that runs on another cryptocurrency's blockchain and make it transparent? Well, we've been there and done that, but this brought me to this, and a lot of you guys have seen this gentleman. He is one of the best in the business, and his name is Louis Jackson, formerly known as Crypto Lew Lew. I think he still goes by it. But Goldback XRP confirmed. In my opinion, I think the answer was yes. And some people say this was debunked, but I, if anything, am going to undebunk it because I think he was spot on, and the guy that he cites in this, I think, is spot on. I'm going to play a little bit of this. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I want you to hear this because when we tie in everything else I have for you guys as well, you will see how all of this ages very, very well. And if anything, who are you listening to in regards to getting fudded out of these particular projects? Are you not able to hold this long enough to get to the finish line of actual, real, life-changing money? Well, that will be your own answer. But if anything, listen to this. He published this, I believe, last year, but it pounds home everything, and we'll get more back into it here in a bit. Let's play this. Here we go.
This is saying that going country to country for regulation, just looking at the US for regulation, just looking at the UK for regulation, isn't going to do anything. There needs to be a global framework for regulation that all countries can operate within, so that these assets, these utility assets, can be used at full force around the world. And so who is this Klaas Knot? Who is he to talk about this? Well, Klaas Knot writes and sometimes speaks on behalf of the Bank of International Settlements, and so is incredibly well informed about the operation and how things happen in policy for the Bank of International Settlements and all of the entities that kind of feed into it. This guy has a very high level view of what's going on. So if we're talking about having an agnostic bridge currency, in our XRP, for example. You also need a framework of law, of regulation that is also agnostic. Having it just in the US, just in the UK, wherever it is, doesn't actually really matter. Countries will have their own laws, but ultimately the use of these agnostic assets have to fall under a different regulatory framework. And the entity that puts that framework in place has to be impartial, Bank of International Settlements, and has to be the intermediary between all the central banks, the Bank of International Settlements. They tick 2 out of 2 boxes for an entity that could actually put in place a framework for regulation globally. And this is all done within the Basel framework. And I'm going to read out the definition of the Basel framework from the BIS website. The Basel framework is the full set of standards of the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, which is the primary global standard setter for prudential regulation of banks. These are the standards the Basel Committee put in place, looking out for all of the banks. So when they put policy in place, they are acting as that intermediary to put through policies and standards for the banks to follow. And within that document, this is where it gets really juicy. And I'm sorry if this is be a long video, but arguably one of the most informative videos that I'll ever put out. There's a document called the Prudential Treatment of Crypto Asset Exposures. And in this document, they talk about all of the requirements a crypto asset has to meet in order to get one of 2 categorizations. And in the document, they refer to them as Group 1 crypto assets and Group 2 crypto assets. What you're really interested in is, yeah, what about my XRP, right? What category is my XRP? Group 1 crypto assets are subject to capital requirements based on the risk weights of underlying exposures as set out in the existing Basel framework. We're going to go into that in a second. Group 2 crypto assets are those that fail to meet any of the classification conditions, and as a result, they pose an additional and higher risk compared to Group 1 crypto assets, and consequently are subject to newly prescribed conservative capital treatment. And a little bit further down, Group 2 includes all unbacked crypto assets. Unbacked. How many crypto assets are unbacked right now? Basically all of them. Which ones have we had talks about being backed in the near future? Keep that train of thought. This document also goes into the regulations surrounding custodial assets, assets that can be taken into custody by banks. But that's a whole nother video. But here's where it gets very, very interesting. This framework also requires the token or the crypto asset to be used has to be not only stable, but it also has to be redeemable, wait for this, for a predefined amount of a reference asset or assets. For example, $1 or 1 ounce of gold, or cash equal to the current market value of the reference asset, for example, $dollar value of 1 ounce of gold. Essentially saying that if an asset goes in to a Group 1 classification, it must be backed by another asset. And the asset they're using as an example in this document has been gold. The value of the reference asset, which is gold, which 1 unit of the crypto asset is designed to be redeemable, is referred to as the peg value. Now the peg value, the way in which this gets pegged is actually decided on by central banks. So the top guys at central banks all get together and decide the peg value. But what this Bank of International Settlements framework for regulating and controlling this whole system says, if you're going to use a crypto asset, it has to be backed by gold. Pair that with the fact that banks have been accumulating gold like nobody's business. I wonder why. And even last year, this article on Reuters says central banks bought the most gold on record last year. They've been positioning themselves for a crypto asset to be a Group 1 asset to be pegged to gold. A gold-backed agnostic currency is coming. And I want you to think about who that's going to be. But let's go even further. Another one of the requirements for an asset to be a Group 1 crypto asset is that it must be interoperable. On page 16 of the Central Bank Digital Currencies Foundational Principles and Core Features document from the Bank of International Settlements, it says right there and then, the system needs to offer sufficient interaction mechanisms with the private sector digital payment systems and arrangements to allow for easy flow of funds between systems. Then on page 12, it says CBD systems will never enter a crowded field of domestic payment systems, and interoperability can enable complementarity and coexistence. For cross-border payments, closed-loop systems, for example, global stablecoins, can potentially offer some efficiencies, but only if they interoperate with others. common international standards. For example, ISO 222. And then even further down on that document, on page 19, it says common data standards has to be interoperable with common data standards, most notably ISO 222. And then on another document on the BIS, it says the central bank digital currencies for cross-border payments. Says that the message standard, example ISO 222, adopted by the interlinkage would act to harmonize standards across systems. And on the same document, a little bit further down on page 33, it says focus area D for this framework is to increase data quality and straight-through processing by enhancing data and market practices. Number 14, adopt harmonized versions of ISO 222 for message formats, promoting the adoption of common message formats such as a harmonized version of ISO 222 and the common rules of mapping or converting data between different data formats. And then Swift talks about interoperability, talking about how CBDCs need to be interoperable, and there's 5 things we need to be focusing on. Number 4 in this list is the simplicity required to scaling global CBDC transactions, and in here it says, and there will be no need to invent new ways of ensuring security, compliance, and authentication and tracking either. We're leveraging the ISO 222 standard to ensure that CBD transactions carry rich, standardized payment data. This is a document from Swift about interoperability, talking about ISO 222. And then we go over to Ripple, and Ripple is on the Registration Management Group standards body, everything related to ISO 222. And then in a final Bank of International Settlements document that we're talking about here, options for access to and interoperability of CBDCs for cross-border payments, right down here on page 18, 3.2, and that first bullet point, it says, hence, compatibility might be achieved, for example, through the use of messaging standards and data formats such as ISO. And it says further down on page 50, interoperability across these systems is achieved through ISO messaging. This form of integration is compatible with existing core banking systems and back office processes of commercial banks and central banks. Now, if that doesn't show you that the BIS is requiring certain things of a certain asset in order for it to fulfill the regulations and the standards that they have put in place. I mean, they're looking for interoperability. XRP, check. They're looking for an entity that actually would jump through the regulatory hoops. Check, that's Ripple again. It needs to be agnostic. Yes, it's an agnostic bridge currency, and it needs to be backed by gold so it can be stable. Now, what was XRP designed to be? It was designed to be stable. It's designed to be backed. And from this information, it seems like we might just be getting that. Now, with all of that criteria put into place, I want you to consider what other assets are going to fall within Group 1. Well, they have to be ISO interoperable. That narrows it down a little bit, doesn't it, right? If they're going to be a Group 1B asset, they have to be stable. We know one that is designed to be stable, and that's XRP. But let's say it's a 1A category. A 1A category means you can tokenize physical assets, right? Well, Algorand is doing that with gold. So when you think of the ISO interoperable assets, we think of all of those ones that we talk about on this channel: XDC, XLM, IOTA, Algorand, HBAR, and Quant. These are the assets that are going to be a Group 1 asset. And who knows, if they actually have the mechanism to be stable and they can be backed by a physical asset like gold or silver or whatever it is, then that's a hurdle we get over at that point, right? And I know this video has gone on quite a while, but we're not even scratching the surface.
Okay, thought I'd leave you on a little cliffhanger because he deserves you guys to go over and watch his video. His video is already close to 100,000, but that guy deserves all the credit in the world. He's awesome. I'm a huge fan of him for many years. But anyway, Crypto Lew Lew, Lewis Jackson on YouTube. Go over there, check him out. He's been killing it. Okay, respect where, good credit where credit's due. All right, so think about what he mentioned there. Okay, so again, agnostic and interoperability, and we can go on and on about some of this stuff. Now check this out. If we take you over to here, I should say if we are, look at this. You're going to see on your screen a key thing here. And this comes from finance-monthly.com. Now, it mentions digital gold standard protecting your wealth amidst a global recession. Why is this important? Well, interesting to see this, but more importantly, more interesting to see that it was last updated January of this year. And boom, look at that. Here's your first boil it, mash it, stick in the stew moment, because Sean Dye, probably not pronouncing it right, is co-founder of Digix Global. Now, Digix Global was acquired by another particular company, but look what it says. Digix Global, founder of the Ethereum Singapore Meetup Group, Sean is currently a technical committee board member at the IT Standards Committee organized by IMDA and Enterprise Singapore for blockchain and distributed ledger technologies, and more importantly, the Quant network standard of ISO TC 307. My goodness. So now we are getting some examples in regards to Quant and gold and all this. And again, I'm not just trying to make this a focus on Quant. Obviously, we had a nice little segment there with Lewis Jackson with XRP. But if you get more into it, like I mentioned, Digix Global withdrawn from the Payment Services Act licensing in Singapore as of September 2022. But their overseas partner, Nexus Gold, basically took over. Okay. So interesting to see this guy part of ISO TC 307, again, the Quant network standard. All right, check this out. Here's another document. This comes from gbglobalcouncil.org. And what you see here is, it talks about gold standard. Country of citation, Switzerland. And it says here, gold standard, GS, is international carbon offset standard. Remember how we said the whole thing? I shared the whole thing in regards to carbon and derivatives and all that. So carbon offset standard, providing a voluntary carbon offset program with the aim of advancing the UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and benefit surrounding communities around projects. It has announced proposals to allow the creation of digital tokens representing carbon credits. Gold standard, for example, is considering the use of blockchain to improve impact data quality, reduce time, costs. You get the gist. And again, think about it. This area right here, I know it's kind of hard to see, and I apologize for that, but it says tokens, carbon credits, climate markets, voluntary carbon offsets. Again, back to what Quant Network was sharing. Now, there's a little bit more. If you go to EU for digital.ed, you will see this EU blockchain strategy. Okay, more importantly, what does it say? The European Union wants to be a leader in the blockchain technology and innovator in blockchain and home to significant platforms, applications, and of course, companies. And what do you see right here? Blockchain gold standard. Yeah, gold standard. And what do you also see right below it? Data protection, digital identity, cybersecurity, interoperability. Quant meets all that criteria, does it not? Now, as I take you more into this and why it matters, as of recently, straight from the Cryptonomist, on Halloween, you see a new update in regards to the exchange of art checks and acquiring King and Shaxson to strengthen its presence and expansion, of course, in the European Union. Why is that important? Well, what do you see right underneath it? Lots of emphasis on MiCA regulation. I'm telling you, when we get proper regulations, everybody's waiting for when are we going to see a utility run. That would be the beginning of the utility run. So lots of mention about under the new MiCA regulation, the exchange archacts will be able to expand crypto expansion, of course, in the EU. We know that Quant's got a thing going on in regards to the Central Bank of Spain. A lot of emphasis on that. But look what it says. Strategic move aims to increase Archax's presence in European Union market. And again, the consolidation of its position in the cryptocurrency sector with a regulated context. Again, back to what I've been talking about for the longest time. All right, any other examples in regards to some of this? Well, the answer is yes, because as we see here from this particular site, which is called paymentsjournal.com, it's setting clear standards, everyone. The impact of MiCA will be felt not just in Europe, but worldwide. In the United States, the discussion around crypto has become highly political, largely because of the uncertainty surrounding its regulation. It remains unclear whether new enforcement measures or entirely new regulations are needed, but in contrast, Europe has established a clear path for compliance. While this is all a positive move, it's not 100%, but no regulation is ever going to be 100% with those in the industry. So it says, but given that clarity was the biggest issue in the United States, it's a good step forward. I think we see it, to be honest. I really think that we see it going into this new year, 2025. Are you going to wait to acquire these assets when they take off? I think that's a recipe for disaster. Some people think that this stuff that we're vested in is a recipe for disaster as of right now. Again, look at the ones that have real utility and understand where we're going with this. As I take you further into this, I want you to understand straight from Blockchain Observatory. It's the European Commission, everybody. They posted all the way back in October 2021 about a pre-commercial procurement. Back to what Lewis Jackson was talking about. And if anything, check this out. You see this company called Dyn. You see this other company called Riddle and Code. And again, EBSI taken to the next level. Why is this so crucial? So you see here that Dyn and these other ones like DECODE are part of this consortium. And it's again leveraging EBSI, distributed ledger technologies, to create international communication services to public administrations. More importantly, what do you see here? Each member of this consortium gathers together a mature experience developing and deploying industry standards, as well as facilitating open source community adoption of technologies. And what do you see? You see major blockchain standardization initiatives such as, boom, ISO TC307, Quant Network Standard, and you see INATBA right next to it. Then you see W3C and Sovereign. Now, as I take you more into this, understand this. And again, this is from 2018, but it's still pounding home. Sovereign Foundation, Ontology, and Evernym collaborate, at least back then, on interoperable decentralized identity networks. What did we see in regards to a lot of talk last year in regards to identity in Europe? Well, if anything, Sovereign, identity for all. You see how this all really comes together? I don't know if you do, but more importantly, emphasis on Hyperledger, Linux Foundation, and look what it says, digital identity, global problem that requires global interoperable solution. So this is all coming together very, very well. And when you get more into this, because I talked about the DECODE project, well, if you go to decodeproject.eu, what do they mention? They mention their progress report on standardization. And it says, further through the work of Dyn, the project has applied for membership to ISO TC307, Quant Network Standard. Like it says, crucial body for blockchain standardization activities. As of June 2019, the membership had been approved. Dyn has multiple personnel working in that Quant Network Standard of TC307. And you see all these working groups. Working group 1 through 5, and you even have joint working groups of 4. And look, it says the use cases working group. They understand the use cases of Quant. And more importantly, you see other examples. And guys, I'm telling you, all of this is popping up left and right. You may think this is a Quant video. I did include all these other ones. But you're going to see more examples of this ISO TC307 standard. And boom, there's this thing called Zenroom. And look what it says. How do you say Quant without saying Quant, right, Channing? No code cryptographic virtual machines. We know that Axelar is standing out when it comes to, you know, some of these things in regards to being another form of a bridge and these side chains and, you know, what David Schwartz was talking about. But look, you now see this. You know, this is a big move, and you won't see an official announcement from Quant in regards to this. But again, in my opinion, and I'll try to do a follow-up with this, how do you say Quant without saying Quant? I mean, if I had a bet on this, I would say this is Quant as well. And it's very well worth pointing out. So, you know, we'll look more into this as well. But man, oh man, nice to see this in regards to no code, okay? Take it to the next part. Why is this important? Because when I get into no code in regards to Zencode, well, it's this thing called DDC or triple DC. Pilot Zencode contracts. Repository talks about smart contracts written in Zencode will run over Zenroom. And again, what do you see? It's in the beta stage, but it's the whole thing of having smart contracts with no code. All right, check this out. I'm going to take you over to here because I mentioned that thing called DECODE. And, you know, when they mentioned Zencode, there's another thing about DECODE. Well, DECODE, believe it or not, actually does mention ISO TC307. Before I get to that, they had a conference opening up DECODE app and tools to third-party developers and, of course, entrepreneurs. More importantly, what do you see? Do you see current and future dissemination efforts of DECODE and software components? Back to what I mentioned about Dyn, they actively pursue partnerships with prestigious actors in the cryptography and blockchain spaces, such as, and you saw Sovereign, but more importantly, you see ISO TC 307, blockchain standardization since 2019. And boom, right underneath that, Hyperledger Foundation and APA. I mean, it's all there, everybody. It's all there. And if anything, we'll see more examples of this. And more importantly, what do we see in regards to recent news? Well, Christiana Aristidou, roughly, I guess about 2 weeks ago, had the privilege of participating in ISO TC 307 plenary in Sydney. And we understand that Australia stands out when it comes to ISO TC 307, but she gives a special shout out to ISO TC 307 Chair Scott Farrell and Committee Secretary Amy Howie. Their leadership and vision are not just commendable, they are instrumental in steering the committee towards meaningful outcomes. Their dedication, the mission of TC 307, the Quant Network standard, is evident at every single session. ISO TC 307 plays a pivotal role in developing international standards. And think about it, trust. And back to what Lewis Jackson was talking about, harmonization. What does it say? Particularly critical in the European Union, where harmonization standards can significantly enhance compliance, governance across member states. To take you over to here, I want you guys to understand this, just in case you don't think there's anything in regards to Quant and INAPA. I don't know why people are saying that. Quant is a founding member of INAPA, and more importantly, understanding that their CEO sits on standards committee, whose role is to promote transparent and inclusive DLT governance and cooperation via liaison with stakeholders, and forms policy and regulation development through close dialogues with policymakers and regulators, and to promote convergence of standards and policies through cooperation to accelerate deployment for the benefit of society and, of course, economies. So I take you over to INAPA. You know, here's the link, and it comes up with a blank page all of a sudden. But inapa.org, INAPA members /quant-network-ltd. Okay? Maybe something new is going on. I don't know. But interesting to see that. And more importantly, back to the whole topic of Basel, because as of last summer, Basel Committee finalizes crypto asset disclosure rules. Disclosure and prudential standards to be implemented by when? 2026. And more importantly, what do we also see here? We see from the Quant Network, look what it says here, everybody. Quant is part of the thing called they're part of this thing called Aspectus Group. What is that? Well, what do you see? They are a global brand marketing and communications agency. Technology, financial service, capital markets. Again, back to what Larry Fink was talking about. Energy, industrials. Look at this. Result, focus, and outcomes driven to meet your business goals. Quant's part of this? Interesting. I'm not going to play the video because I get hit with a copyright strike. But, man, oh man. I mean, look at all the ones they helped. And more importantly, look at this. Quant's branching out into other things? Well, of course they are. You know? And what do you see? ESG communications? I mean, think how many standards Quant has in regards to ESG. And if anything, look at this on the bottom. Remember I talked about Quant AI? AI usage statement, cyber essentials. I mean, come on, guys. All this is coming together. They have a certificate. Look at this certificate, data certification last summer, July 15, 2024. They have to, get a new one next summer. Mark Shaw. Okay. Cyber essentials. Complies with the requirements of a cyber essentials scheme. All there, certified, all there. And look at this. This is good stuff. Look at this old publication. This is really old. Remember I talked about NIST? I don't know if you guys remember some of this stuff. I know you do, Channing, but I don't know if everybody else remembers this. But anyway, so United States Department of Commerce, National Institute of Standards and Technology. Why am I sharing something that's so old in regards to standards activities of organizations in the United States? Because I want you to understand, when I talked about that video about long before Bitcoin, like there was Ripple, long before Bitcoin, there was Quant. Look at this book, 1991, for crying out loud. And did we see NIST, having a thing with ISO TC 307? We did. I'm not going to reshare that. You guys can go back and watch that. But watch this. Look at all this focus on interoperability. Standards and activities. You see, for example, because I just mentioned Mark, serves as a means of promoting. That actually isn't with him. I apologize. But anyway, the whole thing is serves as a means of promoting with high quality conformance, interoperability for OSI ISDN, products, services, indicator, multi-vendor interoperability. I would say Quant Network with Overledger is a multi-vendor interoperability solution. Look at this. Jump down to this part. Yeah, look at this. It's all here. A lot of emphasis on interoperability. And I will show you or share with you guys in a future Quant video about the whole thing that recently happened with the central banks meeting in Washington, D.C. on October 6th. But you see it all. Representation of exchange carriers, interests, and all standards and related technical fields. Again, like there was these visions of the past of like interoperability solutions long before the whole talk of blockchain, right? Long before it, and so there were some real deep connections here. NIST is a real thing, and this book is from 1991, and this is part of ISO TC 307. This is why I share some of this stuff with you guys. All right, back to Lewis Jackson real quick. This is becoming quite the deep dive, and that's all right. Lewis Jackson mentioned Group 1. Okay, look at this in regards to this from bis.org/BCBS publication, D545 to be exact. On this particular page of 1736, Group 1B crypto assets. Look what it says. Look what it says. It says, aside from these common elements, Group 1B crypto assets may be structured in a variety of different ways. Banks that have banking book exposures to Group 1B crypto assets must analyze their specific structures and identify all risks that could result in a loss. Each credit must be separately capitalized by banks using the credit risk set out. So a lot of focus on some of this. And more importantly, as you jump into this next part, look what it says down here, actually, Group 1B crypto assets that reference a pool of traditional assets. Banks must apply the requirements applicable to equity investments and funds to determine the real-world asset applicable for direct holding of the reference pool of traditional assets as required. And now we have this deadline, I believe, coming up in January, another one in March. I mean, come on, everybody. Think about this, okay? All right, look at this. This is good stuff. This comes from Kitco News. Why am I sharing this with you? Well, LBMA and WGC met with the Bank of International Settlements to reclassify gold as a high-quality liquid asset under the new Basel III banking rules. Again, this is why I put so much focus about Basel and Basel selecting Quant and all this. July last summer, 2024. Okay? And look what it mentions here. I'll jump down to this. Look what it says. It says here that the LBMA WGC delegation met with Neil Esho, Secretary General of the Basel Committee, and Noel Reynolds, the head of Basel III implementation, to make the case for gold as a high-quality liquid asset. And what is cited here? HQLA. I don't know if you guys saw my video about HQLA. That pounds home that in regards to what we talked about with HQLA. And if you're wondering about that particular exchange, it's HQLAX technically. But it's the reclassification of gold from its current status as a Tier 1 asset to an HQLA would bring about enhanced market stability, improved liquidity, regulatory compliance benefits. You get the gist. And that's all there. Gold market concerning data transparency, and of course, the potential. All right, check this out. I know I keep saying check this out, but if you guys weren't aware of this, HSBC tokenized gold, right? This was announced back in November 2023, roughly, like a year ago. But look what it says. HSBC announced the first trades of gold tokens where the physical gold is stored in HSBC's London vault using distributed ledger technology. Institutional clients create a digital twin of the physical asset. The tokens can be traded on HSBC Evolve, the bank's digital platform for FX and precious metal execution. And look what it says here, just in case you guys didn't know about this. Straight from cryptonews.com. Prior to the launch, HSBC teased a tokenized gold offering in collaboration with Ripple, owned crypto safe keeping specialist Medico. The move was part of the bank's new digital asset custody plan. Again, this matches up with everything we've been talking about for a while. Everything. And look at this. What about R3? R3's in the news quite a bit. Who's going to buy R3? Are they even going to be fully sold? Is it just a minority stake? We don't know. But look what it says, everybody. November 2nd, 2023. Congratulations to R3 customer HSBC on the launch of its DLT-based gold tokenization platform. You see how that aged. So, interesting to see some of these things. And more importantly, what about XDC in the mix? Well, if anything, Securrency, leading blockchain-based financial markets infrastructure and products company, announced a while back that they will deploy its proprietary digital asset composer on the XDC network. Yeah, there's definitely that. Because when we talk about XDC and Copper, you guys didn't think I was going to mention Copper? I am. From copper.co, Copper acquires digital asset brokerage firm Securrency Capital Limited. And what do you see? October 11th, 2023, Copper establishes a foothold in the United Arab Emirates with the acquisition of Securrency Capital Limited, a regulated blockchain-enabled brokerage firm offering digital securities trading in the Abu Dhabi Global Market ADGM. And more importantly, why is this a big deal? Well, all of this is a big deal, not just XDC. It's the derivatives market, everybody. The total world derivatives market has been estimated to be $1 quadrillion. Think about that. And think about these visuals. If anything, I'll zoom in a little bit more. Because you see how one $100 bill stacks up. You take, basically $10,000 of those $100 bills. Then you take 100 million and you see how that stacks up. And look at the left side of the screen. Then you take, for example, 369. That's $1 billion how it stacks up. And then look at that visualization of this guy. Look at that. And then look how it all stacks up as far as $1 quadrillion. My goodness. This is why I will not shut up about these particular assets and why we hold them. Because, yeah, they might not go to the moon tomorrow, but it's just a ticking time bomb. And look what it says here. Regulatory-friendly Zenfin XDC has begun partnerships to monetize the derivative market via secure tokenization. The current trading value of derivatives is estimated at $1 quadrillion. Now, in closing, here's the icing on the cake, because I mentioned a lot about Quant. Shout out to Quant Papa in regards to this key finding from the video. This is Martin Hargreaves of the Quant Network. Listen to this. It's not long. Listen to this. If you stay this long, you want to at least listen to this. We'll play it. We'll come right back and wrap it all up. Here we go.
The examples we had was a company that was looking to tokenize vaults full of gold into effectively stable coins backed by physical gold. So they could do that, but they had a couple of 100,000 users. They were looking for millions of users, so they need to connect to a larger exchange to be able to do that. And that's the sort of protocol that's where we need a standard, because there are high tens to low hundreds of these things coming up, all proprietary. There are dozens of bridging solutions that work for one or two of those things. And actually, this is a space where a global standard, which is really agnostic to what's going on behind the interconnection of the networks, is going to be really important, because their business models are quite different. The nature of the assets that are on there and how they've implemented them is quite different. What is common to them is they need to move them agnostically from one network to another. So this is why we think IETF is the right venue to be able to do this, because this is effectively, these are a whole bunch of autonomous systems that need to talk to each other without a lot of knowledge of what's going on behind them, and transfer data in standard ways, safely using using two-phase commit type protocols in order to be able to open up these markets. And there's tons and tons of value in that, both in the CBDC world, and in the capital markets world. And that's the areas where we're looking.
So there you have it. My goodness. If anything, understand where quant even plays a role into it. That video of Martin Hargreaves confirms everything that we've been talking about for quite some time. What you guys have been hearing about for the longest time in regards to, is this asset backed by gold? Is this one backed by silver? Is this one backed by copper? Etc., etc., etc. So just simply do me a favor. If you listen to the entire outline and type this into the comments, and that is this key word, and that is an abbreviation, I should say. AB, as in asset backed. And I'll know that you listened to the entire outline. Really appreciate you guys. I won't keep you any bit further. Let me know what you thought about the outline, though. We'll see you guys on the next one.
If managing your crypto feels like solving a puzzle, it's time to switch to Decent Wallet. Say goodbye to complicated setups and hello to Decent Wallet, the hassle-free solution to your digital currency needs. With just a few taps, you can manage, track, and secure your crypto with unmatched ease. And here's the best part. Grab your Decent Wallet at a discounted price by using the referral link below. Don't miss out on making your crypto experience smoother and more secure.